Okay, the time for talk is over. It's time for the maiden flight of the Eachine Airloader. So, I will meet you out at the field. Alright, it is maiden launch time of the Eachine Airloader. I guess I'm about as ready as I'm going to be. Let's see. Alright. Don't have a lot of wind out here right now, which is good. Let's see if we get it facing into the wind that we do have. Alright. Time for truth. Let's get it in the air. Oh, that wasn't good. I had it throttled up there about 60% throttle. Apparently that's not enough. See if I did any damage. Other than some crap in the grill. It looks unharmed. Well, let's try this again. About 75% throttle. Alright, take two. The Eachine Airloader. Alright, well, we're in the air, but certainly feels like my got too much expo. Yeah, I really need to tone down the expo. Feels really mushy. I have the elevator at neutral position, so it required about 75% throttle and a really good chuck to get this thing airborne. And it's pretty light. Like I said, I'm under 1,300 grams. The motor doesn't sound too good. Doesn't sound too good, does it? I've got my timer set for 5 minutes just to see how much battery it's going to use. Since I have a small 4S 3300 milliamp LIPO in it. I'm flying around at about 70-75% throttle right now. I'm going to bring it back around and throttle it up a little bit.
It's climbing ever so slightly when I throttle up. And that may be because the flaps are hanging down just a little bit, providing a little additional lift. I'll take care of that before the next flight. But it seems to be pretty stable cruising around at this speed, but like I said, I'm about 75% throttle. And I do need to take some expo out. Just checking it out, just getting comfortable with it on its first flight. Alright, my alarm is complaining. So let's see if we can bring it in and land it. Feel better if these controls weren't as mushy as they are. But we'll see. Oh man, that wanted to glide. I'll come back around. Alright, that wasn't the prettiest thing, but I was kind of chasing it a little bit. I've got to pull some of the expo out of the ailerons in the elevator. I had it at 60% expo. I'd watched a couple of other flights and it looked pretty twitchy, so I wanted to make sure I had enough expo in it. I'm kind of curious how these landing pads are going to do out here in this rough stuff. So far so good. So not much trimming required. It looked like it wanted to roll to the right just a little bit on the aileron. It wants to climb a little bit at full throttle, but I think that's because I've got a little positive flap in there. The flaps hang down a little bit further than the level with the aileron, so I think that's producing a little more lift and causing it to nose up ever so slightly when I go to full throttle. But not too bad, other than a bad first launch. But yeah, so my suggestion is, and with these pylon mounted planes, I hate to throttle them up more than 60% on launch because you never know about the thrust angle if it's going to push the nose down really hard on launch. Now this one didn't seem to do that. It pushed the nose down ever so slightly on launch, but it just didn't have enough thrust to push it up in the air until I launched it the second time with 75% throttle, and then I was able to take off with it. But and that was pretty rough stuff that it hit, on that first launch, and I don't see any damage to it. So durability test number 1 seemed to work out okay. So I'm going to check and see how much juice I have left in the battery. I may go, if I have enough juice left in the battery, I may go ahead and throw it up again. See you in a minute. Okay, so I checked the voltage in the cells. It still has 4 volts per cell. I think I had it in the air for 5 minutes and 31 seconds. I was surprised at how floaty it was bringing it in for a landing, but it really wanted to glide. So I've toned down my expo on the elevator and the ailerons from 60% to 45% because I was just kind of, with that amount of expo, I was kind of chasing it. The controls felt really mushy, and It just didn't respond fast enough to the controls. So we'll see what 45% expo does for the control on this. Now that I know I need to ramp this up to about 75% throttle on launch, we'll see if I get a successful launch out of this one. Here we go. Oh, that was close, wasn't it? Boy, it was hard for me to grip that. Alright, let's lose some altitude. Yeah, the controls feel much better at 45% expo as opposed to 60% expo. Don't feel nearly as mushy. I may kick that down to about 35%. Yeah, I don't know if that sound is the motor or if it's the prop. I noticed that when I throttled it up in a static position, that prop was flexing quite a bit. So it might actually be the prop that doesn't sound quite healthy. But at speed, it seems to be pretty well behaved. No issues so far. I haven't even done any trimming on it yet. Yeah, it feels much better. And again, I'm cruising around at about 60% throttle. Pretty slow roll. I'm definitely going to have to increase. My aileron throws. I just had to try that out. Now that I got the Maiden out of the way. Pretty lethargic on the roll. I'm still keeping some altitude on it right now until I get comfortable with it. See if it has any bad tendencies. Not a good roll either. I mean a loop. Okay. Enough fun until I get my throws the way I want them. Alright, so let's bring it back in and land it before I have some company out here. I've already had some traffic out here this morning. See if we can bring it in without crashing. Oh, crap. Okay, well that wasn't pretty. I was trying to get it down on the ground, man, and it just has so much lift. I think this is as floaty as the Volantex Ranger G2. I didn't expect, a plane as heavy as this one. Let me see, is there any damage? Okay, so that's durability test number 2. And it survived. Alright, so if this thing can survive my landings and attempted landings, I think its durability's pretty good from what I've seen so far. Alright, so I haven't even done any trimming on it yet. The only thing that I've done is decrease my expo, and that was a huge benefit. I'm going to increase my throws on the ailerons, since, I like nice snappy rolls, right? Even on an FPV cruiser, so I will do that before I make any modifications to the current expo, which is 45%. And it seemed to have plenty of elevator when I attempted that loop, but just didn't quite have enough speed to pull it through nice and clean. But I'll see you back at the HQ, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do with it. See you there.
Okay, so it wasn't pretty, but it was a successful maiden flight. It came back in one piece. So it had the maiden flight plus 1. So when I first threw it in the air, this is why I call it a maiden launch instead of maiden flight, because the first launch was unsuccessful. This plane is a bit of a bear to hand launch, especially if you're not throwing it into much wind at all. But I went back and I looked at the video for the second launch, and I had it throttled up about 70%, and it took right off. On the third launch, I actually throttled it up about 75% and launched it, and it kind of nosed down. So I think 70% throttle on the launch is the sweet spot with a very good chuck, and I think just a slight upward angle with a good chuck will get it in the air fairly easily. The hard part for me is hanging onto that wide fuselage while it's trying to pull out of my hand to get it launched. But 2 out of 3 anyway. So on the first flight, it was kind of like flying a dump truck. I had way too much expo in it. I had watched a couple of other flights of this plane, and it looked like it was pretty twitchy. I don't know how much expo they had programmed in when they flew this plane, but 60% expo was way too much. After I decreased the expo to 45%, it felt much more locked in, but I don't have enough movement on the ailerons, and I would like to have a little more movement on the elevator. So I'm not going to touch the expo on the elevator and ailerons until I test it with additional movement. So I'm going to increase my dual rate on my ailerons from 70% to 85%, and I'm going to increase the dual rate on the elevator from 70% to 75%, and then test that out. Now the motor or the prop sounded a little weird to me when I was flying it around, and that's probably because I overlooked one thing before I took it out and performed the maiden launch. I did not remove that prop and balance it before I took it out there, and it has been a very long time since I have received a prop that did not need balancing. So my guess is that's probably what it is. So before I switch props on it, because I want to test it with an 8x4 and an 8x5 prop, before I do that, I'm going to take that prop off and make sure it's completely balanced, the hub and the blades, and then take it out for another test flight and test everything out. If there's a lot of vibration from that prop, that'll also cut down on the amount of power that you have. So I want to make sure that that's good to go for the next flight. So once, I flew it at speed the whole time. The only time that I was below 60% throttles when I was going in a straight and level line, and there were a few times there where I was crossing back over straight and level where I decreased the throttle to 50%. I seemed to be doing really well at that throttle setting in level and straight flight. But in a turn, I would throttle it up somewhere between 60 to 70% throttle. I didn't see any bad tendencies from it yet, but I haven't tested the stalls and stuff with it yet. So I want to make sure that before I do anything crazy with it that might cost me the airframe, I want to make sure that I have it all trimmed out and make sure that I have all my dual rates and my expo movement on the control surfaces exactly the way that I want it to handle and fly, and make sure that it feels very locked in before I do some silly stuff that might cost me the airframe. So all in all, it was a pretty good experience. This is the largest, heaviest plane that I have flown so far. So other than being a bit of a bear on launch, it was fine. I did not expect this plane to be so floaty coming in for a landing. It has a listed stall speed of 30 kilometers per hour. What is that, 18.6 miles per hour. So I wanted to keep my speed up a little bit when I was coming in for a landing. And the first attempt that I made on that first flight, I had pulled the throttle back to about 25% throttle, and it just kept on sailing by. So I had to go around and come back, and I had the throttle completely cut, and I was just gliding it down. And it does, when you do get really slow speed, it does want to start drifting a little bit. So you saw it right there at the end on that first landing, which wasn't too bad of a landing for the very first landing of this plane. But it did, all of a sudden, when I got too slow with it, it wanted to drift a little bit. It wanted to wobble its wings a little bit. So the second time that I came in with a little more speed than I had on the previous landing, and it was floating all the way down almost to that rise in the road, and then it curves back around. I didn't want it to go over that rise, so I tried to slow it down as much as possible, and then I started getting the wing wobble again, and pretty much stalled it there at the end. But no damage to the plane other than a few dings in the foam underneath the elevator where that stiff pointy scrub caught it, and a few abrasions right underneath the nose in front of those landing pads from the bad first launch that I had. So pretty good experience with this plane so far. I do want to get it all trimmed in, get everything handling, get it locked in the way I want it to fly, and then we'll play around with see if it will do a stall turn, see what it looks like from a normal stall with some altitude, make sure that I can recover from it okay. But pretty cool plane, I have to say. So stay tuned. I will try to have this back in the air one day next week when weather permits. I've got a lot of stuff going on this weekend, so I won't be able to take it out again. I'm going to wait until I get it all lined out and flying the way I want, so I can practice a couple more maneuvers with it before I give you my conclusion on this plane. But not a bad first outing, considering how much the fact that I had way too much expo in it during the first flight. I was a lot more comfortable with it during the second flight. Oh, and the first flight, I had it in the air for 5 minutes and 30 seconds, 5.5 minutes. The second flight, I had 4 minutes and 48 seconds in the air. That comes to a total of 10 minutes and 18 seconds. And after 10 minutes and 18 seconds of flight, and I was not soft in the throttle, and I wasn't backing off a whole lot, it still had 3.8 volts per cell, 15.2 volts per pack. So I would say that is a pretty efficient power system that they've got on here. And I think once I balance that prop out, it will be even more efficient. So with a very large 4-cell battery, doing long range FPV at 50 to 55% throttle, since you're not going to be doing anything crazy like I was with sharp turns, climbs, and rolls and loops, I think you're going to get a tremendous amount of flight time out of this plane. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the air.